Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Covenant Cast. I'm Zach.
And I'm Steven.
And I'm Jonathan.
And today we're talking about technology in tabletop. All right, like we do, we like to start the show by answering questions from the last episode. At the end of each episode, we ask a question to our audience, and you guys are awesome enough to leave those in the comments. So we're going to kick it off with Wade Jones. Steven, hit me up.
Wade Jones, Steven, here we go. Great shout out to Fog of Love. I ran into this at PAX Unplugged and quickly picked up a copy. It's a different style of board game and really fun with the right people. I'd like to know more about PAX Unplugged, by the way.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Fog of Love because I was ready. I was ready to jump on that.
I do want to know more about that, but I saw PAX Unplugged come down the pipe, and we kind of looked at it, and it was like, that seems good. Mm-hmm. But I haven't really heard anything about it since. So if anybody
like those PAX guys.
Yeah, exactly. If anybody went to the convention, leave us a comment, let us know. But Wade, continue, so excited to see your Alpha VAR tokens. That's good.
Nice.
I haven't bought any because I've been waiting to see what you do. That's a lot of pressure there.
Just a peach.
You asked about favorite peripherals. That's tough. The older I get, the more I want my gaming to be something I can really relax with and enjoy on every level. I feel like that's just so spot on.
That's
I feel the same way.
100% on that one.
Having a great table and chairs rather than the plastic con table and folding chair, for instance, which is kind of the model of our store in a lot of ways, isn't it? Mm-hmm. We started that a long time ago. I love having a good place to game, nice mat, dice rolling surface. It's little details that make a setup feel clean and well thought out. That aside, my favorite single peripheral is our acrylic tokens. That's awesome. Thank you, Wade. Play Netrunner with some quality tokens and it elevates the whole experience. Tokens are often the first thing for a new game that I start investigating upgrades for, so like trying to upgrade. Simply because I use them every time I play, and they help make every game feel more luxurious. I agree. As does essentially kind of the table and chair situation, too.
Yeah, Wade is dead on.
That's really important. Atmosphere, I appreciate atmosphere more and more the older that I get, and really just deciding on the things that I want to invest myself and my time into and making those things as good as possible. And that's one of the great things about having a few things that you do rather than a lot of things that you do. Mm-hmm. If you really specialize in a couple of things, let's say board games and music, for me, or games, I should say, and music, then you can spend your budget making those two things great. Whereas if you're doing 20 different hobbies, like you kind of it's harder to make them all great. So I agree with Wade.
And also, I think there's something to be said about the table and chairs. I think one of the things that we've learned is that people treat themselves the way that they're treated, and they treat others the way that they're treated. So for instance, if you have like crappy tables and crappy chairs, there's a much higher percentage that you're going to be treating people bad. You're going to think about yourself bad because that's the environment that you surround yourself with constantly. If you have comfortable chairs, a nice environment, a warm environment, it kind of breeds a whole different thought and outer thought. Yes, that's a tone.
It sets a tone, and that's real. I mean, that's important.
And the environment that you play in is important.
This is your free time. This is what you choose to be doing when you're not at work. And so you really want that to be as comfortable as possible.
What's also interesting about this comment to me is the idea that tables and chairs are peripheral.
Yeah, I like that. I love that.
And for me, it's like good tables, good chairs, and music are like so foundational to playing a game that I don't think about that anymore.
So you're saying we got Covenant chairs coming down the pipe?
Yeah,
Covenant chairs. That's right.
TM.
That'd be cool. And it does. I do like the idea of basically your environment and your atmosphere being a reflection of, like Jonathan said, the mental state that you then begin to inhabit. I talk about that tidying up book all the time.
Yeah.
And if it's similar, it's kind of the similar theory where like if your environment is cluttered, you feel cluttered. If your environment is clean, you feel that cleanliness and it's more relaxing and you can kind of focus better. And in my own life, that has been 100% the case. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is a big part of the future of kind of the tabletop gaming space. And it's very similar to the theory that the nicer you dress, like the nicer you feel, like the better you feel. And I've noticed that too, like started wearing like nicer shoes and stuff. And it's like, yeah, you feel more professional. Yeah. And it reflects in your behavior and your attitude. So this stuff is really important. It's not like witch doctor stuff. It actually is significant.
And it's little stuff that you can do like that you can you can choose to dress yourself better, and like it's like the thing. The more you smile, the happier you are. All this stuff has research.
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
Cool.
Wade,
I need
great
to do more
comment.
smiling, really.
Oh, man.
All right, so
what do you got, John?
I got one from old Nathan Souter.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Didn't we have one of his last time, or?
He's been recently featured as a question and answer. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks for continuing to interact with us, Nathan. And he says, I certainly do love myself a good insert or storage solution that both consolidates the plethora of components a game can come with and functionally serves whilst playing a game, which is what you want to shoot for. Functionality.
There's so many board games that are this way, where you see like the inserts and people pull it out, and it's like you can play 10 times. Like you get to playing 20 minutes earlier because you're not like sorting all your
And then if you can
pieces.
like throw me a little bit of flavor, like the game's flavor in there, to like you get people sort of mentally prepared, boom, be great. However, Nathan says, I'm an absolute sucker for playmats, which we agree with here, and as much as I'd like to attribute my being a sucker for playmats to the ease they provide in handling cards on the table, it's really just because they look gorgeous on the table. And this is also true. It's not, again, setting the tone.
Certain playmats can, yeah.
Certain playmats can, certain playmats also can't. But again, you're both Wade and Nathan here are talking about really dressing up their surroundings to get them in a mental state to relax, to have fun, and to really enjoy an imaginative experience, competitive imaginative experience. The last thing he says is maybe my favorite peripheral will change when you get some more Mythos boards in stock.
Nice.
And we can have one of those.
Awesome.
More on the way.
There's always more on the way.
There's always more on the way.
Trying to make those as fast as we can.
We got the forge just like...
It's a great problem to have, too.
Yeah.
But, you know, we haven't
also
really...
hard to make.
We haven't capitalized, I think, so much, or even we haven't had a proper discussion. This kind of brings it out about the role that even things that we make, the tokens and the Mythos boards, how that helps to set the stage for the entire atmosphere of the experience. We talk about being very thematic and bringing you deeper into the game, but there's also having nice things like that. I feel it when I use all sorts of nice tokens, even the inserts when you pull out the game like you're talking about. There's something to that I think we have not capitalized on, at least in the marketing, and that it's just like the atmosphere that you set for yourself will dramatically impact the fun and the experience that you have. So maybe we'll speak to that in future ad campaigns and the like.
The experience is a big part of it. I think that's something that we can really...
I haven't used personally the Mythos boards a ton, but I know with the data tokens for Netrunner, that was particularly, I always felt like they brought me into the universe. Like it felt like it was part of the universe. I don't know. We experimented on the squad tokens too, about the feel.
Oh yeah.
The literal feel.
Yeah.
But there is an element of, I think it's akin to the table or the chairs or the music or even the shoes you're wearing when you're at work, where it's like when you're playing, the tools you're using to do so actually impact the experience that you're having.
And it's kind of like what we talked about with the very top of Nathan's comment. It's like if you have organization, it gets you into the game faster, but if you have thematic tokens, that gets you into the game faster in an own, like,
in
not
a thematic sense,
in a mental sense. Yeah, but you got to detach from work somehow.
All right, my answer is from Alan Jones.
Man, Alan, just getting played out here on the cast.
He's a weekly special. We're going to soon just have the Alan Jones segment of the cast. Thank you, Alan, for being so participating so much in the comments. He says, my favorite peripheral was my first Team Covenant X-Wing compatible miniatures game replacement maneuver pieces. I was enamored with the fact that I could replace my cardboard, which is prone to dying out rather quickly, with quality materials which did not skimp on style. Having come from a card gamer world where promos, full bleeds, and a general ideology of replace and upgrade stuff as you desire was commonplace, I was happy to see that happening in a miniatures game. And of course, as I mentioned last week, was the Awakened Navy templates being my favorite thing we've done. I agree. I think the templates are another one of those. That's actually both, it looks good and it feels nice to use, but going from cardboard to something that's just more longer lasting. Because I have some of my original maneuver templates for X-Wing on some of those old ships, and it's like they are on their last leg. Just like worn down, the print has faded away and stuff, so that's very cool.
And it's cool to zoom your ships across them.
And then before we dive into the whole technology and tabletop thing, anything notable happening in the Stephen and John sphere this week?
I played Arkham on Saturday. We made it through 3 scenarios in Carcosa, and it was an absolute blast. We got all of them nailed.
Nice.
We got a lot of extra pips. We went out of our way to explore some locations just to get the experience, kill things that were needed, and the first one was a little rough. The second one was pretty streamlined, and the third one, we were beating it so badly that we thought that we were messing up.
Like you're doing something
like
wrong.
That happens in Arkham sometimes, where it's like, and by the time we got to the end of the encounter deck, we realized that we had just gotten significantly lucky. Because there's like 3 cards in the deck that have a big effect. It was the kind of scenario where you don't advance the agenda with Doom, but it stacks up on the board. And then we were able to go around and like eliminate those threats in time before the doom stacked up. But then at the very end, like the last turn, we hit like 3 cards that were move all doom from the encounter to the agenda. So it would have been permanent rather than having to, being soaked by the things. So we were able to eliminate all of that from the board. So when those cards hit, there was nothing to soak.
Wow.
But then we just kind of tooled around a little bit and got extra pips and experience, and it was great. I played Rex, Seeker, just incredibly good. His ability, if you succeed by 2 or more, you get an additional clue when you're investigating. Mm-hmm. That's wild. Think about that in terms of like action compression.
Yeah.
And then, you have cards where if you succeed, get an additional clue. If you succeed.
Wow.
So I could go in and get 3 or 4 clues off of a single location. And when one of your teammates can do that, the rest can really focus on other things. Robert was playing one of the spellcasters, the lady that adds charges, and was going around shriveling stuff. It felt very thematic, was doing the scrying business.
That's cool.
And it had this thing that was adding charges to the spells and ritual candles, and it just felt so thematic. Philip was playing the Gravedigger, and he had a couple of plays where he would attack with the shovel, then use an action to get a clue with the shovel by discarding it, because he can dig for like clues. And then he would attack the monster again, kill it, which let him go to his discard pile and grab his shovel back and put it into play.
That's awesome.
Nice.
So you think about he's like smug, and then like, there's a clue over here, and then he kills the monster, grabs his shovel back, So it's just very thematic, and it was a phenomenal experience.
Sounds like a blast.
It doesn't get any better for me than Arkham right now. I think it's everything that I want, and the mood is good. The atmosphere was right with the Mythos boards, the tokens.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful table at Philip's house. It was just really cool. I love that
Locked
game.
and loaded.
I think
it's a great game.
It's right there on the top rung for me, for sure.
I think the system itself is designed the way you build your decks and choose your investigator and progress. That like the legs on that game, I think, are immense. Like
I could play that forever. I mean, with new investigators,
and we've seen that with Lord of the
playing,
Rings, even just the cooperative style. But I think it's a real game that has some serious legs.
And we're playing on normal, so let's not forget we can start cranking the
ratchet it up,
difficulty.
yeah.
It's just got so much replay. It's the true success of the LCG format to me. Those cooperative games.
I agree.
What about old John?
Well, so on Saturday, it was Friday night. It was Friday night. We all got together and watched the opening ceremony of the Olympics.
That's
Stephen
right.
was there.
Yeah.
It was a whole lot of fun. But the best thing about it was that the next day, I woke up. My wife and I were there. We woke up, and then we didn't leave. We just stayed there with our friends at our friend's house, just watching the Olympics. And I was talking to Stephen about this back in the day whenever we were in college and doing more of that kind of stuff, like a lot. We would always kind of make a point, and this sort of happened because we all lived together, but we would definitely all spend the day after the big night just hanging out, watching movies, chilling, just like being cool with the people that you were with the night before. And we talked about that endlessly in college, about how we liked the day after more than the party itself. And so it was really nice to re-engage with that, because since I've gotten out of college and all that kind of stuff's harder to come by because of responsibilities, and you're just like, I got it, my schedule's so packed. It was nice to just kind of like just lay it out and like let the weekend unfold and be with friends, and it was great. So,
It's that freedom, man.
Yeah.
Not having to go home. It's really
Just
crazy.
doing what you want.
Yeah, just doing whatever I want. So that was a big deal. The other thing is I picked Zelda back up after a long hiatus.
This is Wii U Zelda.
This is
right?
Wii U Zelda.
Which Zelda? Breath of Wind?
Breath of Wind. Yeah, I think
Ring
that's
of
what it
Wild?
is.
Breath of the Wild?
Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild?
I'm not a Zelda guy.
Anyhow, yeah. So I beat like 3 of the first bosses, and then I've got 1 more to beat. I put it down. I picked it back up on these kind of cold winter nights, and it's in my head.
Turns
now.
out Zelda's still great, right?
It's still great. It was nice. I'm glad I took a break because I was kind of starting to get burnt out. But it's such a good game that it's very enjoyable. So
Nintendo's so good at that.
oh yeah.
The game creation is where they can put in anything. They can put out
agree.
cardboard stuff, which I love. That idea, that label. We should talk about that at some point.
Oh, yeah,
How
it would be.
genius and in brand that is for Nintendo. But man, they haven't missed on a big franchise, like a Zelda or a Mario in a
They are
very long time.
both those 2 games were up for Game of the Year in
Mario
2017.
Kart, like all of
Mario
these are
Kart,
just
yeah.
like
Some of the
constantly
classics.
great.
Yeah.
All the new ones are still
Just
somehow
because
great.
they focus on people having fun above graphics, above everything else, and a lot of people have panned them about that back in the day. But this guy,
I've never panned them
actually
on
not
that.
really.
they have always
dumb concept.
they've always taken risk and focused on the fun, because they have because when their hits pay off, they bank the money, and then they take more risk, and they figure it out. Like, you can see the evolution of the Wii to the Switch pretty easily, but they're continuing to focus on fun, so they retain their core audience, and then they just keep on going. And then sometimes it hits big, and then they do some more experimenting, and then sometimes they put out cardboard stuff, which is just, again, so in brand. I love it.
Nice. Well, for me, I actually had a really busy weekend. I got less Destiny than normal, as we can touch base on. We have the Destiny regional coming up in Tulsa, so it's a whole new world with a new
also
set.
playing Adepticon.
Playing Adepticon.
Trilogy format.
Yes. Which is actually making me want to play that instead of the other stuff. But anyways, a lot of family stuff, birthday parties, basketball games, that kind of thing. So nothing too crazy, but just like I got to the end of Sunday and I was just like, I want to be around nobody right now.
Oh, you had to recharge those batteries
going on. So yeah, a lot of recharging, and then now we're here. So
well, all right.
That's really it. Pretty simple, just full and back to tabletop.
These things happen.
Back to the table. All right, so we're going to be talking about technology in tabletop, and there's a handful of different technologies specifically we're going to be talking about and how they've been used with tabletop, but kind of the structure of this episode is we're going to start with the least amount of technological integration, and we're going to scale all the way to basically complete technological integration and some interesting conversations that come up along the way. So we're going to kick it off with digital integration. And so this is a concept that is, we have Imperial Assault the box here. It's also been seen with like Mansions of Madness, but it's the idea of defining tabletop games as cardboards, miniatures, physical things on a table, but introducing the technological component integrated with the game, right? So whether it's an app in Imperial Assault that can be the Imperial player, or Mansions of Madness that can kind of walk you through these scenarios, or some of the, I forget the name of the game, but there was a board game that came out a couple years ago that the soundtrack actually changed how you played.
You pressed it, and then it was like the clock, the timer. So you were, it was a dice, it was a thing. I remember rolling a bunch of dice and trying to get certain things to move to the next stage, and so the music is racing, and then you're trying to get to the end. It's like escaping a tomb or something.
Yeah.
And you're running out, and there's people running around you and moving, and you guys are moving each other's way.
But then like when the music goes to like the slower, it's like it's clean up, and it's like you can only do these certain actions and things happening. And there, at some point the final sound is going to hit, and if you're in the temple, you die, and if you're out of the temple, you didn't.
Is that like an
right?
Escape the Pyramid thing?
That kind of thing. Pyramid Escape,
Pyramid
from the old War.
Yeah, one of those things.
Warcraft. Oh my gosh, everybody knows that.
And I think on an even lighter version of this, right, you have the integration of so Takedo did the deluxe edition with a soundtrack, which has nothing to do with the actual gameplay, but it's like setting the environment of the game, right? And we've also seen other technology being integrated. Infinity.
I mean, where you print out your list, like that's a big deal. You have an army builder on a website.
Well, and even more minimally, right? Like the steps are like even just having a deck list builder online, or having a tournament system that lets you run. So there's technology getting integrated all the time.
And importantly, on the Infinity part is that that allows the home office to tweak things and change things without the need to reship everything, which is a really good solution.
Less than a patch.
Yeah. I think it's an excellent solution.
It's worth noting, I think the absolute pullback from this, because it's funny to think about a time when this wasn't the case, is that first of all, you have websites. So given what we talked about with the state of tabletop, the 70s, imagine tabletop gaming with no websites. I mean, whenever forums started to show up, that was a huge deal for the industry, I think, being able to connect with various people.
Trolled old web RPG back in the day, looking at D&D
that
tips.
RPG Net and that kind of thing.
Well, and we used to, when we were playing Star Wars TCG growing up, it's that was very early internet, right? We had Rebel Basers, which was a popular forum for the game where we discussed it. Wizards had their little website. But even then, it was you really found out about product releases and what was coming out at your local store or in your local community, right? And then it was even just finding other people to play with, right? It was finding stores, imagine in the 70s, it's you just have to look at the phone book and be game store or hobby store. And it's
Imagine too that you walk in and here's a new thing that you had no idea was coming. A new set. I had no information about this.
I actually miss these days, which is back in those days with Star Wars TCG, even that was in the early 2000s when there was computers and internet and stuff. But I would never go into the store the day a new set was coming out and know everything that was in it.
Never. You'd be opening packs and I've never seen this before.
And that was part of the joy. And both finding things you've never seen, every card you're reading, right? Because you've never seen them before. But then also it made showing up and everyone opening their stuff at the same time really exciting because, in one box of that game, you're not going to get everything. So like if there's 10 of us here opening boxes, we'll probably find most things.
Yeah.
But even still, it's like you'll get it home and look online on the forum and there's a card you just haven't seen still.
Yeah.
Someone's like, oh, I got the
the
Darth
crate
Vader.
dragon
Like,
or
whatever.
whatever.
So, technology, there's a lot of ways that it's not just about the game, right? It's how we play the game, how we find the game, how we buy the game, how we talk about the game.
And I think it's also important to note that, like, really, for the history of tabletop games, going all the way back to chess, etc., has not had technology. Unlike video games, which obviously can't exist without technology, this tabletop games has only recently adopted all of these crazy things and is still, I think, very much in that adolescent phase of the early adoption of something that has been not anywhere close to the nature of the game beforehand.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see a lot of that stuff
in the next decade.
In the next decade, yeah, just trying to suss it all out.
We haven't even really broached the topic of how has technology impacted the literal production of a game. Not just the, Imperial Assault has the app that now lets you play it easier in the campaign mode, but think about producing a game in 1970.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you find where to produce it, ship it, digital? Think about Imperial Assault's models. It's like, how does the creation of models and if you're producing it in China, it's like it's phone calls and it's flying over there and it's like, you can imagine the ways in which technology has just transformed.
We've got some God tier models here, and they were 3D printed and then sent right to the caster. Boom, done.
They send the file, then they can print it there.
They can print it there and then ship to the thing and out to everybody. That's crazy. The quickness on that and the ability to customize. I mean, you see these model qualities just going through the roof because you're able to do it all digitally and then print it out physically, and that barrier is getting much lower.
So there's that's essentially, I think, the foundation that we're sitting on. It's like there's a lot to this. It goes deep underground. It's like the iceberg. You see just the very tip top. But talking about kind of the top that we do see, which is Imperial Assault app, I think would be a great example.
Yeah, augmenting the gameplay experience, basically.
So I think there's a category that is making the game easier to learn and then making the game easier to play. And both of those can be similar. So like the Imperial Assault app can run you through setup and then run you through the game. And then there are some that's just like digital rulebook, or it might just explain the rules, or you might be able to ask rules questions. You might be able to type it into an app, those kinds of things. So really, the question that I have on this, kind of the most basic integration front, is at what point do we cross a line? We've tried to kind of figure this out as we go along. At what point do we cross a line into basically taking away from the goodness of the tabletop experience? So would anybody be willing to say that reading the rule book and learning the rules the old-fashioned way is integral to the experience of playing a tabletop game?
I would say no.
No. There are some people that will say yes.
Yeah.
100%.
That's true, and having that physical thing.
And the discovery process of the rules themselves, especially playing D&D, as I go to the next page and it's like, here's how a spell works, being able to read that section over and over, maybe get it wrong a couple of times, figure out how to do it correctly, that kind of growing process with the rules, there's some appeal there, right?
I mean, I think this is why you see, even when we're talking about technology to teach games, we've been doing lately the learning series of content. And it's like that; those are videos that are on YouTube, the technology involved in creating those, the blogs that we're writing and posting. But even then, it's like, I think there's an important nuance that kind of hits at this same question mark, which is there are some people that approach our learning series from a video format, right? They want to watch it, they want to engage in that way. And there's other people that read the blogs and they want to do the reading. So I think with learning how to play a game, there are people that would rather be taught the game, and there's people that would rather pour over a rule book, and there's also people that would potentially rather be the teacher. Like there's that role of teaching a new game to people is really exciting for some people. And if you just learn it on an app or a phone or it's walkthrough on this thing, you remove that element from the experience.
But can you, with Imperial Assault, do they still have the manual included?
Yeah.
So you could technically, it's not that you have to have one or the other. One doesn't necessarily eradicate. The app doesn't eradicate the rule book necessarily. You can still read it
But the teaching of a game with technology can be significantly more streamlined and easy.
Certainly.
One of the, I think, admittedly, for a lot of people, one of the biggest barriers to playing a new game is, I've seen it. It's like a new board game hits the table and someone's reading the rule book while 4 or 5 other people are sitting there waiting to play. And like step one is like, well, having someone that's played it or familiar with the game going in is helpful.
Yeah, and the app is that, right?
And then it's like having that person without having it, someone having to go through that experience the first time is really a big deal.
This hit me like a bolt of lightning whenever I was reading old Jane McGonigal's Super Better. Is that she was saying like basically all this research that I'm giving you supports both video games and tabletop games, but I'm mainly going to be talking about video games because the barrier of entry is just so much lower. You can get people in and going, and so you can test a lot more people a lot faster that way. So that's where a lot of the studies have been done. But like that struck me as a huge barrier for tabletop games, which I do think technology could eradicate.
And so
it's solving a problem.
The problem of learning / teaching the game.
Isn't that really probably where the line is?
See, here's the deal.
Once technology is no longer solving a problem, a direct problem that currently exists in tabletop games, then it has overstepped its usefulness. This is true with anything.
I mean,
right?
the where it gets a little fuzzy for me though is that defining a problem, what a problem is,
and maybe creating a new one too.
But we were talking last week about the idea of forever games have pretty much been dice, boards, cards. Miniatures is kind of the elements. And so technology technically could be another tier where the things you could do designing a game with technology involved is significantly different. As an example, you look at like Arkham Horror, and right now the scenarios are card-based, and it's random, and you guys didn't hit those 3 scenarios until the end. And so, that could be fine and the randomness associated, but that also means that like you could unnaturally get super difficult or super easy cases. So technically, an entire Arkham Horror scenario could be through an iPad or a phone or an app, and
guaranteed to hit these things at certain times.
Just you can build things in to an app that you can't build into a random stack of cards. Because even a deck of cards that's like the chaos bag as an example is technically a randomization effect, right, on the game and in the outcomes of the game. And it's one of the hallmarks of Arkham, I think, is that the way the chaos bag works. And I'm not saying it's the right or wrong. Like you should.
That's really But as you're saying that's the weird thing to me is like, why does that feel so wrong?
I can't figure it out either. But it feels fundamentally wrong.
Am I just old fat?
It's like the second that you bring a screen to the table, it's over. You're done. It's not tabletop anymore, and it shouldn't be around.
Even so much, but that's hard to argue. I mean, Imperial Assault, there is no amount of there's some amount of downside that could offset it, but being able to not have an overlord, being able to play fully cooperative Imperial Assault is a massive benefit. Yeah. And you're looking at a screen?
Well, and even the,
XCOM, that kind of stuff.
That's where, to me, it's like, it's less about the, how much do you need to be looking at the screen? Because even Imperial Assault, as an example, the board, you're looking at the board, physical models, you're setting the environment, and when you're playing, like when I play X-Wing, I feel like I'm flying a ship, and so I wouldn't want it to become like at the center of the table is a screen that's got the map on it, and it's got the thing, but at the same time, even just in like informing you or telling you what cards to bring out or crafting a story like an Imperial Assault, the way the stories are built is creative, and that's the trees where if you win or lose a mission, you go these directions on these trees and the outcomes and things you gain, but obviously you either have to do a lot more work to be very specific about controlling that experience to make it thematically fit, or in technology, you can you get a lot more possibility. But the other part of that that's interesting is in Imperial Assault, just with the way they did the attack on Hoth as an example, or the Hoth box, and it's the storyline with a book and a manual, and it's like this whole thing. But the other thing you can't do once it's printed, one of the advantages of this is that you can update this at any time.
Right.
So the Han Solo pack comes out, and now the mission can actually be added to an old storyline that you can't go back and add necessarily.
See, and I don't know why, for me, it seems so much better if they were to put that out in a PDF format that you could print out, rather than updating an app that you're looking at the table. The problem with this entire discussion is I don't know why I feel this way, but I feel it so strongly.
I feel the same way, and I'm not usually a feeling guy.
Well, I think part of it might be, you look at something like Mansions of Madness, right? And I think Imperial Assault, I don't have the exact reasons why, but feels a lot more appropriate in that the problems being solved and the utility being offered is very high.
Yeah.
But it's also not removing the play of the game that's happening in front of me.
Does it also have to do with Imperial Assault having technology be appropriate in it? Because like this guy's talking on a walkie-talkie, Whereas in Arkham Horror, you're in a creepy old mansion.
That's fair.
You know, and so like it doesn't feel right.
You
to have a
can
screen
brand
around.
it. You can theme it to where it looks like it's in the Star Wars.
Yeah, it looks like a little
universe.
Star Wars.
Yeah, I can see.
But
that.
I think the thing about Imperial Assault though is that
But still.
what it's really managing is all the things that happen when you're not playing. So all of the like campaign management that happens is the thing that's being replaced. It's not replacing. Whereas Mansions of Madness, as an example, is replacing literal things that happen in the game.
Yeah. I just
I'm
think you
struggling
need,
with this.
You need to see. I feel like maybe at least you need to see the gears turn in tabletop. Like that's part of the charm of it. That's part of what draws it. Is there's no real hidden like mathematics going on.
Well, I think I actually know the case you guys should be making.
Okay.
Which is
make my argument
please
for
help
me here. Yeah,
No,
I'm
which
having
is
trouble.
so philosophically speaking, on some foundational level, right? Both of you very much, and we were talking earlier about games, right? And the complexity of games, and the nuance of games. And so the reality of introducing a technological component, all it does is allows a designer to make more complex systems.
Yeah.
And more complex systems in and of themselves have no value for really either of you.
Yes, I
where
think
you're coming
that's
from, where
correct.
it's like why are we having to create game? We don't need this. It's not necessary to create a thematic.
Maybe it's like
tabletop
maybe
experience.
it's the anti-minimalism argument, because I would be willing to make the argument, and Lord knows I love Imperial Assault, but I've never played it with the app. And I know that some people absolutely love it because, again, it gives them the ability to do
Play
that
solo
kind of
or
stuff.
play without the
But
Imperial
also,
player
people
or-
love playing, Netrunner online. They love Tabletop Simulator, and I understand the reasons for that. But all that said, I would say that if your game depends on technology to function, it is a badly designed game, and that you're just covering up. Like, you're covering up the complexity with a nice skin, because you could just take all that out, right?
I mean-
there needs to be, maybe one of the things that bothers me
But
is
sometimes
like,
it works.
sometimes it works. One of the things that bothers me, as I've said before, creativity born of restraint dies of freedom. We all know that. That there needs to be borders on this genre. And I would be happy saying that no screens at the table feels like the right border to have.
But-
now you can print out your list.
I think I just been over here sitting. Sorry, finish that thought when you're ready.
But you can print out your list. You can do stuff before and after. I think that was just fine. You can print out scenarios. You can bring them into the physical world from the digital world. But when you have that sort of just when you can play when it requires batteries, it feels bad.
But here's why, though. I think I've got it. Okay, I'm really excited about this. It goes exactly to what we were saying earlier with nice chairs, nice tables, nice peripherals. It's about atmosphere and tone. And the moment that the atmosphere of the game playing experience includes a technological interface, you've lost the atmosphere that I traditionally love about tabletop games, that it feels lost in time, that it feels timeless, that it could be done for like thousands of years ago and thousands of years into the future. There's some kind of connection there to that side of tabletop games and that tone of cracking open a book or having a piece of cardboard that is it just feels like it goes so deep. And that is the thing that I enjoy so much about the tabletop gaming experience. That atmosphere of ancientness in a lot of ways. That I feel like I'm connecting with something that has been a part of the human experience forever. And that a screen is not that. Right? That feels new and shiny in what I do in my normal everyday life.
I was about to bring that up, is that we are surrounded in this current culture by screens. I mean, I'm looking at my computer right now. There's computers all around us. We have our iPhones, we have our television, and this...
Or our Android phones.
Or Android phones.
Or our Google Pixels.
And there are people...
Or iPhones.
And here's the deal. There are amazing VR games right now. There are amazing video games right now, and yet somehow tabletop is more popular than it's ever been. Right? So there's something essential about tabletop games that are drawing people back to it. And I would make a very strong argument that is a reaction against screens.
Two things. Before we go to that question, which I want to ask, which is why is that the case, right? So be thinking about that. The thing about Imperial Assault, where I think it is riding a line that is correct, whereas Mansions of Madness, for some reason or another, doesn't feel completely correct to me, because Mansions is... playing of the game is in the app kind of a thing. So it's like, why is this just not the digital version of Ticket to Ride kind of a thing? Why am I not just playing the game in the app? Like, why are you making me do anything? But Imperial Assault, the thing they've turned into technology is not the playing of the game, right? It's all of the stuff that you have to do to have a campaign story-driven, because it's like, when you're setting up for it, like, think about it, we were talking earlier, how the inserts, right, with the board games that make it quicker to play. And it's like, to play, not only do I have to have the people, do I have to create the map, do we have to set up the players and the tokens, and I have to get the models out? I probably have to think about painting the models if I really want to go for it. But like, and this is just the system they created, right, which is like, you have the Imperial class decks of cards you have to choose right and mix up. You have the reward you have to go to the right stages on. You have to track experience and what upgrades have we bought. And you have to, and so like, all of that, to me, is getting in the way of a actual tabletop game.
To be completely fair, there were spreadsheets that were made and that I used by a friend of mine, old Philip Rowland, friend of ours.
Just automating the whole process.
Automating the whole process, and they're doing that. But how they're also like, Imperial Assault is actually a really good case to argue this whole thing on, because it's right on the line. But Steven has a very good idea, and I don't want to take it away from him.
How could you feel it?
Yeah, I could feel it.
But imagine with a game like Imperial Assault, I think there are two ways of looking at this. One is the gaming experience is what happens once all of the tedious things are done. And then there's another perspective, which is the gaming experience includes all of the tedious steps, like setting up, touching the tokens, putting them in the right pools, making sure your board is organized, like getting everybody in the right opening positions, getting their cards laid out correctly, getting everybody sorted. That you can also just as easily include that. That could be a part of what makes the tabletop gaming experience so good for you. So our friend Zach over here, for instance, likes to get right into the game as soon as possible. Like, the game starts when it starts.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, like, I like the entire, like we're talking about, the atmosphere and the tone that gets created as you crack that box open. That sliding box noise, and that release of air, and pulling out the components and setting it up. And it would be stupid for me as somebody who is so into vinyl to not make very direct and obvious comparisons, because the experience of a record starts when I pick it up out of the thing. It's not when I put the needle on. It's feeling it, it's pulling it out of the thing, it's getting the right track on, seeing the cover, and then putting the needle on, and then you get to enjoy it. But I think if you didn't have to do those things, the enjoyable experience of actually, having that music play or having the game happen, maybe it's as simple as it's less enjoyable because you didn't work for it as hard.
Yeah.
And there's always that kind of, that psychology is always around in random, studies and environments where it's like, you need to put in some work to fully appreciate something like cooking a good meal. You've got to chop the vegetables and try and get the meat marinated.
And there's actually one of the reasons that our society is kind of struggling with depression is potentially that, right? Everything is so immediate and so disposable that there's not any sense of just like a permanence or ownership. So potentially that's the case, because, if you look at, for instance, if you look at like Blood Bowl, right? Like, Blood Bowl is a game that for a long time was not supported by the main person. Games Workshop. And yet it had a giant fan base that grew and evolved and all that stuff. But they couldn't have done that if Games Workshop said, well, we're not supporting the app anymore, like, we're going to take it off the App Store. And it's a fearful thing, or maybe it's a non-permanent thing, because like, when you buy a game, when I buy a chess, right, I can play it forever.
Fleeting,
I don't want to be, and look, this is going to get a little bit into my own weird psychology. I don't want to be beholden to any corporate master to play the game.
Man, it's getting big.
I have bought this thing, and I want to put it on the table. I don't want you to withhold a vital piece from me.
I will posit an idea here, which is that I'm cool. Like, I think it's cool they did the Imperial Assault app, and I think they did it well, because you still have the very physical version if that's what you're into. But even better, right? Instead of spending time, as an example, being the Imperial Overlord and constructing these decks and putting the pieces together and getting the right models and doing this whole thing, all the experience tracking and all that stuff, I would much rather have it be tech-based. And here's the thing, right? It's not about it. To me, it's not about let's just make this like easy so anybody, like, it's just like the easiest thing in the world. Take any effort possible out of it, because ultimately it's like, well, why aren't we just playing checkers? Like, let's just go back.
Sure.
But that said, I would much rather that same effort be used and capable. I would love to see this where the Imperial player not get replaced, but give them the tools to create their own campaign. Right? And have it where the thing about the app is that we don't have to print cards, we don't have to ship cards, we don't have to pre-make a story. But it's like we're literally giving you the power to construct this story for your group. And that's the work that is meaningful to me, way less than the work of like literally finding all the cards, keeping it organized. Because like you play a campaign, right, and you choose these two classes and you mix the cards, and it's like the next time you play a campaign, you have to literally separate the cards.
Yeah, it takes a while to set up for sure.
This stuff.
But I mean, if you have a good insert, maybe.
And I think your best take on this is if you assume that you get a group together and they have 3 hours a week to play Imperial Assault, how do you rate/value the setup and teardown as compared to the playing? Because like if playing the game is of more value than the setup, even if you do enjoy setup, then you may as well spend all 3 hours playing because that's maximizing the enjoyment, right? So the app for a vast number of players is maximizing the most fun part of the experience. But I do think that there are some people who, just genuinely enjoy the organizational and tangible aspect of separating the cards out, like you said, and they don't say it in kind of the, I gotta do this, but like, all right, let's get set up to play kind of way. And then also, I think there is a subset or a subconscious even reality that might make that an important part of the experience somehow. Just like the physical, tangible setup and getting the game ready. It's kind of like cleaning your house before company comes over. There's a certain satisfaction to showing off, your efforts to a player.
Like when you get the big Twilight Imperium board.
Yeah, and it's like, I did this for you guys.
And I do think one of the things I think to take off Steven's point is
take off my point.
That is. While I will argue and I would love to be convinced otherwise, but I would love to just kind of help my own self understand my own argument. But I would much rather have people playing like Imperial Assault with an app than nothing at all.
Oh,
right?
certainly, yeah.
And if it makes it easier, if it makes it easier to get in, if it lowers the barrier of entry, then it's a good decision. But because you can be a purist and run everybody off. So I don't want to go down too much that route.
Yeah, that's very true.
However, you gotta think about like if you're on Imperial Assault, at what point do you just put controllers with it and call it a day?
Why are you not just playing this on?
Right. Why are you not just it's cool that you can play it like cooperatively.
Which is, why do you think it is valuable to have the physical nature to this, right? Why is it that 10, 15 years ago, it's like, you can play Magic Online, this is going to completely replace the physical, board. We've seen Ticket to Ride have a digital app, we have Takedo as a digital app.
Summoner Wars actually kind of almost, didn't it shoot itself in the foot because everybody was just playing the app instead of the game?
I don't know.
Yeah, and then we got Hearthstone, which is drawing everybody in the world in. How many people do you say were playing Hearthstone?
I think they're very hush-hush about specific stats, but as of like 3 or 4 months ago, it was 70 million people had registered, but they don't talk about like active users or whatever, and it's you have to dig and find, but that is a completely digital game, right? But at the same time, in spite of that, and in spite of Magic Online and Pokemon Online and Tabletop Simulator, or whatever. And
hey, our own TC Open, which is played on Vassal. Not our own, but it's run by Theorist. Not official.
But anyways,
so
why do you think in an age when everything is supposed to be getting crushed by technology, obviously we have games that are coming out with integration, but not completely analog, non-digital games are better, more successful than ever.
Yeah.
And part of that too is that they have been helped along by technology on the production, marketing, manufacturing, and even the ability to learn how to play a game and see it on YouTube before you buy it. It used to literally be, you wouldn't even know that came out until you randomly were at the store and see a box.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's really cool.
Sometimes that is really cool.
Let's not forget, like not knowing anything about the game and opening it up, and it's like, maybe sometimes you get, this is the best game you've ever had, and sometimes it's like, this is awful. But
and that's such a great analogy for this whole thing, right?
It's kind of like watching a random movie, back when you didn't have IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes
or your
anything.
Netflix percentage match.
And you just look at the back and you're like, this sounds interesting. And the path to discovery then was a lot more interesting.
So how valuable to you is the path to discovery versus not wasting, it's like, even just thinking about Netflix, it's like you don't spend time browsing the video labels at the store anymore.
It's all about the best stuff.
And it's literally just like, either someone's referring it to you, or someone sharing it on Facebook or Twitter or whatever.
There's a site that came up about 6, maybe 8 months ago that was just set up to capture all of the best on Netflix SEO.
Yeah, makes sense.
Just like, and it's
Paste magazine,
and they're killing it. Yeah, it's just like because everybody is searching what is the best on Netflix right now.
January, February, March.
What is the value of the journey, right? To learn acquisition, and also, why is it that in the digital age, board games and tabletop games killing.
Here's the problem with that question: is I can answer it with 3 words. I don't know, because at this point, to answer it, I would have to venture into like the spirit of humans being together and like kind of metaphysical, like what binds us as a society, the unseen threads that make us a community. That is a tough answer to have.
Actually, I can put it into probably more tangible terms, which is the 3 of us actually have experienced two separate atmospheres. I'll stick with my atmosphere kind of focus. We've been together playing Halo as a group, and we've been together role-playing as a group. And those are 2 game-playing experiences with the same people, and yet, why and how do they feel so much different? And it's not that, certainly not one is better than the other. I get as excited for the Halo nights as I do for, we're going to roll up some characters and explore a dungeon. But they're undoubtedly different. Like when you play and when you feel the room and when you're across the table versus staring at a screen, they're very different. And there's not necessarily one that I prefer, I would say.
I think what's weird about our experiences, though, and correct me if I'm wrong on your latest video game expeditions, but the vast majority of the time you're doing that, you literally do it in the same room with the other people. Whereas like a lot of people play Halo or Call of Duty by themselves at their home.
But
that's a totally different
he was talking
thing,
about, we used to
right?
go over to our friend's house and like hook up 4, this is early Halo 1, hook up 4
Xboxes,
have TVs.
They go to Bryn's or
Fantastic.
whatever. So imagine that, right? So we've
Same room.
eliminated all variables, not all of them, but same people, same type of thing, same room, same game playing. One of them technologically focused, another one, what would we say, people focused, table focused.
I think it's just the real difference, because they both have similar, when I think back, positive things happening.
Right.
The community and the
Human
people around, the
connection,
connection.
the community,
But the difference really, I mean, like when you're sitting there playing Halo, right, it's all of us doing this, looking this way.
Yeah.
And when we're playing RPG, it's all of us sitting here looking here.
Yeah. However, even if you had like a board game, we can make this. We can take a couple more variables out. You have a board game with a digital board, because if you have a normal game, everyone's looking at the board. You have a digital board, everyone's looking at the board. Yet that still seems very different. The only thing I can say, and this is
not.
you can tell I'm grasping at answers here, but maybe a screen generates its own light that is not beholden to the light that everything else is under. That maybe that in some way makes it other and makes it odd.
It is certainly artificial.
Makes it, outside, like you're looking into a portal outside of your current existence or your current location, and that takes your mind in some way away from your current location. I don't know. That sounds kind of goofy, but I'm trying to quantify this.
I think it all really ultimately ties back to really early in this episode where we're talking about the environment and how that affects, where the shoes you wear affects how you work, right?
Yeah.
The clothes you wear affect how you work. And the setting of the board and the music and how comfortable you are all affects everything. And so when you're talking about literally picking up a chess piece and moving it, that is a different experience than having a controller that moves that piece, right? And so I really do think, I mean, you can dive into the like electrons versus,
I do.
pixels
I think the
conversation.
philosophers are going to be trying to figure out a lot about the real and the benefits of the real in the next coming decade. And we'll probably get.
But it's like there is a reason that people like to, like, as an example, go to a coffee shop and get a coffee, or go to a store and physically touch things before they buy them, right? And so like in all these cases, when you're playing a game, not only are games inherently like, this is what's happening instead of all of us looking at the screen, like we're looking at each other instead of the screen. But also there is the physical nature of it that affects how you feel and how you think. I know when I'm playing X-Wing as an example, X-Wing versus Vassal, online X-Wing, absurdly different experiences. And I really don't enjoy the Vassal version quite nearly as much.
And it's the same thing, it goes back to the record thing, like playing an MP3 on a computer and pulling out a record, they're very different. Same music, it can sound the same, regardless of how you come out on that argument. But there is a physical thing to it, but I think the easiest way to kind of explain this, or at least take a crack at it, is as compared to when we're playing Halo together, or when we used to play Halo together, whenever we're at around a table, we're noticing body language. We're connecting with each other non-verbally. Is Jonathan bluffing right now? Is he about, like, if we're role-playing, is he wanting the spotlight? Like, I can feel that. I can tell that he's about, like, he wants to jump on the scene right now, and I can recognize that. And so we have to be mutually aware of the other people at the table, and that creates a very human-centric atmosphere. When I'm playing Halo, I don't see that body language. I don't see anything going on the human level. I just see an avatar of what Jonathan's character is doing in the game. And so being able to connect, to create this kind of human emotional web around a table is something that inherently technology is not doing whenever you're focused there instead of here.
And I think that might be why on the Mansions of Madness note, or on the something that becomes too technologically driven, or playing the digital game that's in front of you, right? Even if we talked about augmented reality, which is like imposing this digital stuff on the board, that may be exactly why you guys don't like that, which is the moment it stops being about all of those interactions and those human connection things that you notice, and way more about the technology happening in front of us, right? It's just moving the screen from the wall to in between all of us, and it's like this is the thing we're doing versus like physically interacting with each other in the board. It does produce a very different experience.
And I would say that's why I like Arkham so much. I was just thinking about it. It's like, and I love Netrunners so much, and one of the reasons is that you are paying attention to the other person and whether or not they're bluffing. But with Arkham, every move, we have a moment to discuss it and give our input and talk through what's the best thing to do here. And so we're constantly connected during a cooperative game, talking over our options. And then I'm still connected, but maybe a little less so in like a Netrunner or a Game of Thrones, aware of the person, but I'm very focused on the board. And so as you move that scale farther and farther away from focusing on the person playing rather than, and like focusing more on the action at hand in the game, like maybe that's where it just starts to cross lines for me. And that line is probably different for everybody, because Imperial Assault, great example of the app, I think there's still a whole lot of human connection going on there. You're still talking over things, you still are playing out your turns. Occasionally though, you break and you look at the app together. And so it's just the amount of tolerance or the kind of the scale on when that becomes diminishing returns. And I think that's different for everybody.
I think if you make it too efficient, right, then you remove a lot of opportunity for that human connection, whether it's setting up the board, teaching the game, the in-between scenarios with Imperial Assault where you are manually doing this stuff.
Hey, can you help me with these? Like, hey, can you sort these cards out?
The trick of that, though, is that, like, if I'm the GM of an RPG and you're talking about the maintenance and setup of Imperial Assault, is in most of the time, it's not like a communal, like, hey, let's sort this, because you're the players and I'm the guy running it, and it's hidden information. And so, like, anytime you're removing it, for me, I think why I like it so much is it's putting that player back into the social circle for longer. But there is a line where it's like, if you remove too much of it, it's sort of like a video game. You take all that away, and so now we're just constantly hit with action. And so if you just have a screen in the middle that's doing it and it's all animated and crazy, you do remove a lot of that human.
I really like the idea of having people help. I mean, one of the things I read in preparation for the teaching podcast, which was a long time ago, said that one of the things to do to get new players in is help them sort the cards, get their hands on the pieces, have them help you with setup. And I think
investment. There's a level of investment in the experience. That's killer.
It's like old Taylor Swift said, picking up bottles on New Year's Day.
That's right.
Like that is important. And even going back to my weekend, like it is important to have not just the action and the people you have just 100% action with, but the people that you have the downtime and the cleanup time, like that's when the ties bind you.
That's
and
why
maybe they're
Last
taking me
Jedi.
to that.
It's the same thing.
That's a different podcast. I'm not ready.
I'm not ready bottles picked up.
I will say one thing about screens is, and I think by their very nature, they demand a certain amount of our attention that most of us don't have the willpower to ignore. And I don't know what that is, probably because they've delivered great stuff throughout our entire lives. We're like, oh, screen, something's cool is about to happen. And I think because they demand that attention, and because we're so lizard brain attuned to that, they can dominate the play space. Now, if your play group is able to sort of stay away from that, more power to you, because there's some great stuff, especially with Imperial Assault, and it goes too far sometimes, but I think that may be the basis of it, is you're trying to take away attention from anything outside, phones, screens, whatever, and put it back on human beings and on the physical.
So, I mean, we could dive into a lot of things here, right? So we have...
Yeah, we kind of got off on this one.
We did.
I was thinking it.
I'm going to bring it back around, though. Here we go.
This is just so critically important to everything that we do on a day. Like, we really hope that something important is happening here, or else we're done for.
So you have digital interaction, right? And we do, for one reason or another, believe that the physical interaction and the human connection that happens over games is important. And I think everyone that plays tabletop games recognizes
We just
that.
don't know why.
And that's why, it doesn't matter technically why,
ideas.
but it's like that is why I think tabletop games have continued to be so successful.
Yes.
Is because there is something to it.
And
there might be a lot of something.
Yeah, quick aside. I know you're trying to wrap up.
I'm trying to get
tell
to the
you.
last question.
But like, you see the same thing happen. People are doing more canning. People are doing more gardening. There's like a whole lot of getting away from this like crazy action-packed society and going into a more. So maybe it's part of that. I certainly think so.
And so like, we're going to dive, we're not going to. We're going to dive into stuff like augmented reality, right? Which is like, again, I think it just kind of, now that you know where we're at here, adding animation and adding effects to the table and crazy stuff is almost dragging to the point that we could dive into that, but we're not going to.
Let me say this though. Can I?
Yeah.
I'll give you my hot take on that, which is
Steven's hot
I
take. 2 minutes segment.
actually don't think, given everything that has been said and kind of my own establishing of thought on this, I don't think the physical pieces actually matter very much to me. I think I could play like a fully holographic
like the
board
holographic
game.
chess in Star Wars.
But if we're sitting right here like this, and we can say move A to B3 or whatever, and I think that's just as good. Like I don't need to physically touch a thing. Maybe I would if I got into it and I would realize I missed that thing. But I think the most important part of this is, are we around the table and are we paying attention to each other?
And you could imagine the design you could do if like that augmented reality was possible. Whether even Imperial Assault, if you didn't have to have the models, if you didn't have to set up the board, if you didn't have to set up the cards.
Even more importantly, for teaching. I think it'd be fantastic.
Oh,
for teaching.
100%.
Goodness
Here's where this
gracious.
card goes.
Maybe
Here's
I wouldn't be okay with that.
But the thing about it, and who knows? Like, well, I imagine we will get here at some point where you can put on some glasses and it's just like, here's the game. It's in front of you. Or it just 3D is happening, right? It's somehow. But
We'll be there.
Yeah.
I assume at some point we'll get
Oh,
there. And then
there's games in Japan that already exist that I saw whenever I was there that you put cards. It's an arcade table. You put cards down, it read the card, and you played someone in the next, wherever. And that was, it exists, but it never got popular. Maybe because the machines were too big.
And I think where I want to go before concluding, and this is, we could, like I said, we could have so many episodes on this, and we probably will come back to this in the future.
It's the nature of tabletop. I mean,
But
this is it, right?
This is the question.
The reality for me of, we're talking about even augmented reality of the game in front of us. And I always picture that the game of kind of chess, the Jark they're playing in Star Wars when they're on the Falcon. And, that's one thing, I think, right? Whether you have to wear glasses or like it just lasers make it happen or something, some technology like projects it, right? But, if you go to the extreme here, I think we get to virtual reality, which is hypothetically speaking, do you think we can get to the point where people put on their headset or they have their contacts in or they plug into the system or whatever, and we might be in different countries or different states.
Yeah.
We all feel like we're at the same table together.
Yeah.
In a game like Imperial Assault, right? We could connect on VR. It's there. We don't have to do the setup. We don't have to own cards. You don't have to print.
I think it'd be 100% fine.
The critical
hypothetically, question one is, can the VR experience ever beat or be exactly as reality? And if yes,
with an infinite number of variables, it'll get there.
We'll eventually get there.
And when it does,
one society
gaming
will.
Well, that's
radically changes.
Yeah, but that's kind of yes. But the thing is once you feel like you're there, if you can get it to the point where you feel like you're there with real people around a real board, and you're the heat and the cold and all of that, the lighting and the body language is all shared by everybody on that stream, then it's reality at that point.
That is
and so
reality.
there's no difference.
But
don't you feel that if you took the helmet off and you walked down the road and played a friend in real space, in meat space as it were,
that it'd be different?
Would it be different,
Because, you can imagine, right?
I'll be in a cave.
We'll have to do it. We'll just have
You
to
could
do it.
pitch this as picturing, as an example, for whatever reason. Of course, Star Wars and Imperial Assault. But imagine if we, jacked in, as it were, and we're all in different countries, so there's the benefit of we can play with whoever we want, wherever we want. But it's like we're literally just sitting on the Falcon, playing Imperial Assault.
That would be cool.
And it's like, talk about environment and the sights and the fields, and it's like, oh, we jumped into hyperspace.
Yeah.
We're like, but, so here's the question, right? There's 3 layers to this. Would the physical version be better? If we could have a physical Falcon, this boat that we're playing on. The second tier to this is it better to play Imperial Assault on the Falcon or you just get to literally be Han Solo, right? Instead of just being your character. So like we could all literally be characters in this game. And instead of playing on a board, like, so the nature of is sitting around a table interacting with each other over a game better than actually doing the thing, playing Halo, right? Being the guy shooting the thing?
And why, I have the why, is that every time you make a move towards, like, as you progress, you go to the Falcon, then you go to Han Solo on the Falcon, you are defining the boundaries harder, and there's less room for imagination. I mean, that's really what it is, right? I mean, the more real stuff you're throwing me into, I mean, the less room I have to explore in my own imagination
I think
space.
Whenever I knew that we were going to do this podcast, this was actually the thing that I was thinking about talking about. It just hasn't come up. But I think there is something fundamentally important about imagination. And I do think that's one of the things that especially the fancier digital integrations don't account for, is that imagination is necessary. I mean, goodness gracious, I can go back to my practical effects argument for that as well. I don't know what, but like I think that it is a muscle that we need to exercise and that feels good when we exercise it. And that's why I'm personally drawn to abstract games, right? And to the sort of the easier, the harder to imagine kind of stuff. Or like not harder to imagine, but you know what I'm saying. The stuff that really triggers my imagination. Even going back to Nathan's comment about like the playmats and how they can sort of trigger imagination and begin to put yourself in a space, not because your eyes see it, but because your brain feels it.
Well, and I think, kind of parsing all this while we're here.
I just want to get that out there. This is
So the thing for me is that I do think it would be phenomenal if I could plug in and be Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Right? But the other part of that is recognizing, it's like the difference between playing a war game and like literally going to war. And so while
quite a bit different.
While it would be nice, both in terms of teaching and experiences and something you want to do, to be able to go to war, so to speak, whether it is as a stormtrooper or as Darth Vader or whatever, that is a very different form of engagement and entertainment than playing Darth Vader in Star Wars Destiny. And so that is why I fundamentally think that we will one day be able to be Darth Vader in a virtual reality game. But the reality is the energy and the brain, it's like you can't watch movies for 80 hours in a row kind of a thing. It's like you just, like if you're actually literally being Darth Vader, you will start getting mentally and physically exhausted. And so there is something about the physical, like, and the imagination element, the physical, and being across the table from someone, and just relaxing and not like literally deflecting bolts with your lightsaber kind of a thing.
It's also just, I think, a smaller story. I mean, it's a zoomed in story, whereas if I'm moving Darth Vader, among other things, on an Imperial Assault board, that's a much bigger story going on. So I can see kind of the overall narrative happening rather than the one that I'm controlling as, embodying this Vader character. But I think the easiest example is like the difference between a Haunted Mansion card dropping out in a game of Arkham and me saying I'm going to go explore that Haunted Mansion versus putting on a VR headset and being in this Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, this is what
that I'm being
always
shown.
talk about. And that's really important to, it's not just the one that you're being shown, but the one that someone else conceived for you to see. You're playing around in someone else's imagination, which I always found.
I like that argument from you. You've given that one a couple of times.
I like my imagination. My imagination can talk to me 100% accurately.
And I think my point is that both are very valid. And I think this is why neither digital games nor physical games are the only thing left, which is some people want to be in the haunted house. And sometimes being in the haunted house that someone else created, people pay to do that in a physical, literal haunted house. So if I can put a headset on and be in the Star Wars universe or be in the haunted house, I do think that's a valuable form of entertainment, even educationally thinking about like, oh, you can literally be in the Roman Empire. It's like, here's what it would have felt and looked like versus imagine, doing an RPG in the Roman Empire where you get to create a story and create characters.
Man. Like when we're playing Halo, we go to Blood Gulch or whatever, it's always the same. It's Blood Gulch. But if you and I were role-playing Halo stuff and it's like, there's trees and a river and this terrain in front of you, it's always different. It's different for everybody and the imagination is taking over. So I think that's one of the elements of the tabletop experience that components that are relatively vague do so well, and they have to be vague because only technology can be so specific.
And physical components allow space for the imagination.
That's right.
And there's I was listening to an NPR interview, a guy used the term the infinite ideascape. And I really like that. And I think to Steven's point that whenever you get too specific on stuff, you actually sequester yourself off from this amazing thing that we have access to, which is imagination.
Our
and the
brain.
Infinite Escape. Yeah. We'll see.
But there are some advantages.
Yeah, there are some definitely
We'll
advantages.
find the line. I mean, we just gotta find the line.
And again, I'd much rather have people playing digitally augmented games that they can get into their time schedule than no games at all, because at least
And it
there's
varies
some
based
connection
on
there.
the person.
Yeah. But there's a lot of questions.
Space for both.
A lot of weird-
Interesting. All right, so we're going to move some questions really quick before we get out of here. You can use the hashtag AskCovenant. We will answer your questions right here on the show. And I'm going to ask this question because I know how obsessed John is right now with God Tier. From Daniel Vincent, and he says, how do you feel about Steamforged God Tier and the alpha testing rules with the community before it hits Kickstarter later this year?
I feel great.
Give me a roundup of what
here's
this
the
is
deal.
even.
So God Tier is a game by Steamforged Games. They're alpha testing, unheard of as far as I can tell in the game.
Sounds like a
tabletop gaming world.
rewind. I think I heard this last week.
Anyhow, so they're doing that. It's basically kind of, they're drawing inspiration from MOBA type games, but it's different. It's
evolved out of that.
Yeah, it's evolved out of that. It's very much the tabletop reimagining of MOBA games, not a straight one-to-one thing. But yeah, they put out a playtest guide, which I have right here. They're talking to people, early access kit, like pretty 3D printed components. They have just kind of basic these things that you put on the board.
For listeners at home, we are holding on to circles and
That's right.
hexes
And then there's
metal
like
miniatures.
just like laser cut.
They look great.
And they're getting like valuable feedback, and I think it's really interesting to put out this whole playtest guide. Playtesting basics. Playtesting is light on play, heavy on testing. Be flexible. Consider alternate outcomes. Even we're going to be asking you about these specific goals. Is it fun? Is it easy? And they're going to be asking very pointed questions. And I just think, first of all, I like the idea of what they're doing, and second of all, I like the actual game. But second of all, I really like them bringing the community into it.
Well, and I think this is a really cool example of, Matt at Steamforged has a video game background. They did the Dark Souls board game, and they did the Resident Evil Kickstarter. And so a lot of lessons have been learned about development and processes from the video game industry that are being applied in a tabletop manner, which is cool because, video games are very digital, right?
Yeah.
And are having influence on this kind of a process, which is, we've been talking about for a while, the idea of how do tabletop games build in the ability to patch?
Yes.
How do they prevent some, even in development now, we're seeing technology basically allowing for people to get involved in a game before it's even like finalized, which is really interesting territory.
The cool thing with their playtest, the rule book, it says version 1.1.0 or whatever. And so they'll be updating that through PDFs throughout, and that number will change, and it will eventually get to a point where they feel like it's ready to release. But, as someone who has really had to learn that sometimes you get too close to a project and you can't see the what's going on. It's so cool and so refreshing for them to be open and be confident enough about their core design to really let people see it and really be invested in improving it to honing it to the sharpest point they can.
And I think that this kind of thinking about a game, where traditionally, right, it's like a tabletop game, you print the core game and the core set of the starter, here's the rules, here's how we play, go. And then you only patch when it's like real bad.
Yeah.
But the idea of a game, as an example, that could literally, like when you get in, you understand that the stats and the models and the game itself is developed. It's a evolving organism. So as it expands, if X-Wing adopted this, that would be insanely great for the game, where it's like, oh, this is how 360 arcs worked in Wave 2 that was released in 2013 before we knew what we were doing.
Didn't even know what 360s were then.
Just be willing and set up an infrastructure that allows you to modify that. Where it's like, once a year, right, you could have the reset, and it's like, here's the new rules. Here's how you now play this game.
Here's what I'll say about God Tier. I think the most critical pieces of this so far, and why we are so excited about it. First, everything Steamforged does is extremely well done. It's polished. This playtest guide, branded well. Show it. I mean, it's got good hierarchy of fonts even. They've got good type on here, good bolding. Like, it looks well done. It looks like somebody really cared about it. And that is the feeling that I get from everything that Steamforged does. They really care about the product that they're making. Second thing, not only do they care, this is an outlet of them caring, they always seem like they're trying to do it better at every turn. And they are just on it. Like they are paying so much attention to the real problems and how they can solve them and how they can continually solve them better over time. So every time that I hear something new that Steamforge is doing or a thing that they've written, it's always like, man, yes, that's the right direction to be moving.
Yeah.
Greatest example of this, single line on this playtest sheet. The focus of this game, of God Tier, will be on casual campaign play. That's it.
That's it. That's what did it for Steven.
Finally.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's like, yes.
How long have we had to wait for a somebody to come out and directly say, the thing that makes these kinds of miniatures games great is casual campaign, like
Storytelling.
legacy style storytelling, and we're going to focus on that not as a thing you can do when you're not in a tournament, but as the game itself.
As the thing.
The thing. Organized play is not just or at all tournaments.
Which is really, I mean, it tells you that they've been paying attention because tournaments will happen. You give people a stick and a rock and a tournament will happen. Like, you don't need to support that.
It's called the Olympics.
Yeah. But they're focusing on the wide net, right? The getting people in, doing the thing after work, getting the thematic sort of thing. I think
great. It respects
it's cool.
itself.
So to answer, how do we feel about it? I think it's great.
I'm excited. I'm
I think
excited
it's
about
great.
it.
I'm
Got the
excited to see
early weird.
I definitely have.
excitement,
I definitely have like the super like
jitters.
give me
Jitters,
anything. You know, I'll read whatever.
All right, we're going to go ahead and answer one more question really quick because
Okay.
I've been wanting to get to this one and it's really related to this topic. Matthew Moody says, as 3D printers become more popular, there's a growing ability to print and play entire games. Imagine sending the rules PDF and miniatures STL files to your local print shop and in a few days pick up an entire board game. The print shops would pay royalties to the people who made the game and you would be able to choose what type of materials you want the game to be made out of. This would bring game ideas to concept faster, and iterative games will become the norm. What do you think of the entire print and play model?
I think it's a great way to use technology.
It's a great way to use technology, and I think that you can set up a really cool environment for this, where the game stores themselves, or the spaces that are associated with tabletop games, I don't know if they'll even be stores at that point, but they can have contracts or agreements with the producers. And the only place you can go to get these things printed out, they'll print it for you. But you like look up, like, okay, let's say God Tier takes this model. You look up on God Tier and it's like, these 5 shops within 50 miles of you are licensed to print this game. So you go in or you call and you say, hey, I want to copy this game. They print it up, it's ready the next day or that night, and then you can come in and pick it up. And then that means that anybody who wants to play this game comes through an environment that is hopefully set up to build a community and or host campaigns and that kind of thing. So I start playing God Tier and I have to go somewhere that should be supporting God Tier and can say, here's your game, also here's the night of the week that we're playing, here's the campaign that we're doing.
Sure.
And like, it would just connect those dots so much harder.
Well, and I think the other benefits that, because I always think about from a manufacturing production level of being able to just go get Darth Vader and have him printed instead of buying it, means that companies don't have to manufacture in China, they don't have to ship it, they don't have to print the packaging, they don't have to package it, they don't have to distribute it, stores don't have to stock it, and so there's so much efficiency is gained. And that's why, we've been talking about these digital games, and technically a virtual reality could let us do board and card games as good as they're currently
iterate
done.
like crazy.
It's like you also get all those advantages too, where it's like you don't need to print it anymore. It's
Yeah.
literally just there. But I do think this is an interesting space. Whether or not 3D printing will get cost effective enough and quality enough.
Oh, it totally will.
It totally will.
And I think eventually it
In the
will.
next
but
5 years, I think it'll be
I mean,
there.
there's
we'll
quality
see.
now. The quality
I thought we'd be there by
roof.
now.
Yeah.
I remember having conversations 5 or 6 years ago when 3D printing was starting to get hot, and it's like, oh, of course you're not going to have to. You can just print the models at that point.
Yeah. I think it's there if somebody wants to take it on right now.
I also think that leaves a big door open for the companies that are willing to put in the work, like on X-Wing, where it's not only made but pre-painted and pre-assembled and pre all that.
Add value.
Where like printing the parts to put your own models together is one thing. Printing a model in and of itself is another thing. But getting Darth Vader pre-printed, pre-made, pre-whatever.
Pre-painted,
I think that's another one of those just opportunities. So.
There's just a lot to think about.
All right,
isn't there?
remember, you can use the hashtag AskCovenant, get your question answered here on the show. We like to end with a question. Those are the answers we read at the start, were your answers to our questions. So this question,
Can I amend this question a little bit?
I mean, depends
Oh,
on
I
how
like
it goes.
that. Yeah.
All right. So the question is, hold
Well,
on.
I don't usually just ask it straight off the sheet.
Oh,
But
Let
go
Zach
ahead.
give the question, and you can
there
follow
it
up
is.
maybe.
That's all I wanted to do there.
How I would
yeah.
naturally phrase the question would be, how do you see technology changing tabletop over the next decade?
I would
or
like
not.
to amend it to, how would you like to see technology changing or not changing technology?
In the next 10
Or the
years.
next
Answer that. We'll read them on the next episode. Until then, keep playing.